In this video, I'm going to explain what a delay line is and how we can use it in digital audio. So a delay line is a very powerful tool in digital audio. And the basic concept is that a sound is simultaneously played or heard while also being held or delayed for a moment of time until the delayed signal is then played or heard. So in software, a delay line is often implemented by using what's called a circular buffer. So let's try to visualize this, where we have a sound, and that sound is then, we send our sound out to a speaker so we can hear it. In a delay line, what we do is that same sound is then, while it's being sent out to the speaker, we put it in something called a buffer. So the buffer just holds sound for a moment in time, and then after that time is released. So we hear the sound, and let's say this is 500 milliseconds, or half a second. The sound is then heard half a second later. So that's the basic idea behind a delay line. And depending on the setting in terms of the actual delay time, so this setting in terms of how long we hold it will affect what we hear. So a very short delay, let's say 10 milliseconds or 50 milliseconds, will give us sort of a slap delay effect, whereas maybe 200 milliseconds or something higher will sound more like an echo effect. What we can also do with a delay line is we can take the delayed signal, and while it's being held in the buffer, and then when it's being sent out to the speaker, what we can also do is take that same signal and feed it back into the buffer. And this is called feedback. And so if we take 50% of the signal and every time cut it in half, what we'll get is, let's imagine we have our delay time is set to 500 milliseconds. So our sound is produced, it goes out to the speakers, at the same time is held for 500 milliseconds, comes out half a second later, and also at that half a second later goes back into the buffer, reduced by 50% in volume. And then half a second later again, that signal is sent out and then reduced again, and just this repeats over and over again until we get 0 dB volume. So that's the basic idea. So we get a sound boom, 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 until it sort of fades away. And so that's the delay time used in combination with feedback. So that's the basic ideas behind any delay line, is that we have some sound, we hold the sound in a buffer for a certain amount of time, that's our delay time, and that the feedback is this signal being fed back into the buffer, into itself, and then reduced by some level. If I have 100% feedback, that will be an indefinite or a permanent loop. It'll go on forever, an infinite loop. So the loop will just keep repeating over and over and over again, which can be an interesting effect. Obviously, if I have 101%, this is actually a way to sort of break your computer or the system, as it will keep adding volume and eventually it will explode. So we want to avoid this. And most delay lines, in terms of a plugin, don't let you do that. There's usually some kind of limit to, some go to 100%, some might stop at 99.9%, just to stop this sort of infinite loop that can occur. So I've loaded a Ableton Live session here, and here's a basic sound.
Woo!
So I'm going to activate this simple delay line down here. Let me show you actually what this looks like. This is in a program called Max, or Max for Live. And so this visually, you can see what's going on. I have the sound coming in from Ableton, and my sound is going out to the speakers. And at the same time, it's going into these two objects called tap in and tap out. This is the buffer. And so I can set the buffer time, the delay time here, for how long I'm going to hold the sound until I release it. It's the basic concept. So I set my delay time to 509 milliseconds, about half a second. So now we'll play this.
Woo! 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 Woo!
All right. So you can kind of see and hear that the sound is being produced, and then half a second later, I hear it afterwards. Now, if I add some feedback to that, that's what this does. So let me keep it at 500 milliseconds or so, and I'll make my feedback at about 50%. And now notice what happens here. I'm going to use this longer sound. So this is a longer sound here. So there's my delay time of 500 milliseconds or so and 50% feedback. Let me reduce this delay time to about 100 milliseconds. And you can hear that with the same amount of feedback. So it almost starts to sound like reverb in a way, right? We're getting these very close delays. Let me make it about 200 milliseconds. If I increase the feedback, now let me cut the delay time and make it even smaller, about 50 milliseconds. And I'll cut the feedback to about 50%.
Woo! Woo!
So delay is very, very powerful. So let me actually show you what this patch looks like. So here you can see the basic difference. My signal is going from this plug-in to plug-out. So from Ableton, from the track, to eventually my headphones or speakers. At the same time, the audio is being held in this buffer, this tap in, tap out area. And then the signal's going out, but then also being fed back into itself at a certain rate. So here's my feedback amount, and my delay time is being controlled by this tap out object. So that gives, now again, another visualization of the way a delay line will work. What I can also do is, besides syncing or adjusting delay time with time in terms of milliseconds, what I can also do is I can sync it to a metronome. So if I have a BPM of 102 beats, let me actually turn on my metronome here when this plays. And what I can do is, in this case, I have these numbers. So this is, I believe, a quarter note. Let's see if that is in fact what it is. I can still have feedback, and here's an added dimension, which is the wet-dry mix, which is the dry is the original sound, and how much of then the delayed signal we hear. So this is about half and half. If I set this to 100%, I'm only going to hear the delays, right? What comes from the buffered sound. If I set this to 0, I'm only going to hear the dry sound. Let me increase the feedback. So that's going to keep going for a long time. I'm going to bring this down. Okay. So that's our basic concept of a delay line. These delays here are created in Max for Live just for demo purposes. There is a delay line that comes in Ableton Live under Audio Effects. You can go to this effect called the delay. If I open it up, these are different presets I can use. So there's some ambient spaces, some things called clean delays, and I could grab any one of these and drop them into a track. Or if I just do this and drag the delay line like that, it just copies it without any, well, there's sort of like a preset here that comes with these settings. So you'll see if I drag some of these other ones into this, the settings will be different, right? So I've got some different numbers and settings and wet dry mix and feedback and all that kind of stuff. So let me activate this delay. And so what's nice in terms of the way this delay line works, and you can read a little bit about this, or right as I kind of mouse over this, you can kind of see under the info view here what each of these things does. So there's my feedback. Here's my wet dry mix. You should be familiar with that. There's sync, which sync means I'm gonna sync it to my metronome, so my BPM, right? Or I can set this to time, in which case now I'm dealing with milliseconds, and again the amount of feedback. These little percentage numbers here, this adjusts the amount of delay time by a fractional amount, by a percentage. So that's a nice way to add some variance there if you want. And then there's a little link button here, which this links them, so left and right are the same. Or I can deactivate this and have separate times for left and right. So let's listen to hear what that sounds like.
Woo! 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 Woo!
And now I'm going to sync it. Okay. So that's our basic delay line. In the next video, we'll continue looking at different kind of delay lines, like flange and chorus. So, but for right now, you can, I would encourage you to continue to load some audio files or MIDI files, some clips into session view, add a delay line effect to your track, and play with different settings on your delay line. Play with things like feedback and the delay time. Try syncing it to your BPM, your beats per minute, your metronome, or just play with different millisecond settings, such as, you know, setting it to 10 or 50 milliseconds, hearing what that sounds like, versus maybe 100 or 500 milliseconds, some different settings like that.